In this video we're returning to the recent Scrutiny Committee meeting where they're receiving an update with regard to the town deal projects. We've covered this subject previously in our Quangos video, and although we're concentrating on Colchester, situations like this are happening all over. As usual, public money that comes from the government comes with strict conditions. It was the previous government that decided that a governance body had to be set up, i.e. We Are Colchester, and they would be responsible for making decisions and monitoring the progress of all the town deal programmes. And it had to be in partnership with the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. We've been hearing so much about that department lately, haven't we? Also, in August 2022, We Made That was appointed to lead the Colchester City Centre Master Plan. And they worked in partnership with the Council and Essex County Council. Parts of their key interventions outlined in the plan include reconnecting the city centre with surrounding neighbourhoods, promoting a zero-emission car-light city centre zone, and improving public transport and active travel routes, and diversifying the economy by introducing housing, creative workspaces and cultural uses to reduce the reliance on retail. Coincidentally, it's just been announced in our local press that part of Colchester's shopping centre, Culver Square, has been sold for £11 million. Colchester MP Pam Cox is very pleased about this. Blue Boys JV Colchester Limited, a London-based company incorporated on April the 8th, 2025, has now been identified as the private investor behind the major acquisition. There are some interesting comments made below the article, which might be worth a read. Back to the We Are Colchester board. They usually meet on MS Teams, and their last meeting was on the 25th of February 2026. For those who are interested, you can find details of their meetings on the Colchester City Council's website. You can see which board members attended the meeting, apologies from others, and also who else might have attended the meeting. Here are copies of the last two meetings just to give you an idea of who attends and who doesn't. Here are some headlines from the meeting, which includes the bullet point, a hard deadline to spend the remaining local regeneration fund budget by March 2028. It was earlier than that, but the government have kindly extended it. Now on to the scrutiny meeting itself. This is an edited version with some inserts. If you would like to watch the full thing, we will post the link for the meeting below. It starts with clips from Mr. Nick Chilvers, Have Your Say speaker, who is saying what most of the residents are thinking.
When it comes to the town board, We Are Colchester, it's a major subject, and it's impacting across the whole of Colchester. East Hill cycle lanes, St Bottles Round and St Bottles Circus, do they really all need to be done at the same time? Now, there's reference to it being proactively managed. Have they seen the number of cars hanging around the entrance to Priory Street car park entrance? Key roads will be narrowed, temporary traffic lights, there'll be major disruption to traffic flow from east and south. More cars along Osborne Street will worsen the bus station chaos. City footfall and commerce will be hit, and the city councillors will be the ones who get the blame. It won't be town board who feel the flack at the quarterly meetings on team. Anybody will be accountable. Why is the town board championing the East Hill project when hardly anyone in Colchester wants it? So far, councillors have kept pretty quiet. Hopefully this committee will probe, ask some hard questions.
Just to remind ourselves why we're doing the town deal at all, and the interrelation with the levelling up is absolutely that we bid separately for town deal money and levelling up money. The government now considers them one and the same. I would say by far the biggest reason we're doing them is to boost the local economy. You know, at the heart of it is for economic growth. The means to that end are to work to maintain and increase the vibrancy of the city centre, because if we can drive up footfall and custom, it supports and creates jobs. With Greenstead in mind in particular, it's about providing access to improved services in our area of highest deprivation. It's about bringing heritage buildings back into use. Now, from my purely economic growth lens, That's all about driving footfall. So we also want to support the economy of the city by boosting jobs, and in particular, the digital forum contributes to that aim. And we've got guests with us today who represent two of the individual projects in the scheme. From the North Essex Heritage Trust, we have Simon Hall, who are the people responsible for repairing and renovating and adapting Jumbo. And on my immediate right, we have Simon Mead, who runs Colby, the business enterprise agency, who are the managing operator for the digital forum. So if you look at the town deal projects in and of themselves, about 70% of them are completed. The actual town deal bit of the Holy Trinity project, which were the repairs to the tower and the roof, are complete. The town deal was also supposed to get us to the point of submitting a heritage lottery bid for the adaptation of the building, and that was submitted about a month or so ago now, and we are currently waiting for an outcome on that. We have built some 5G infrastructure which is not universal by any stretch of the imagination in city centres.
What did he say there? What do you think he means by that?
We have built some 5G infrastructure which is not universal by any stretch of the imagination in city centres.
And this is what Matthew Sterling said last year.
This relates to the 5G scheme, but when the base stations are put in place, this shows you the coverage we'll have of 5G of the city centre. First town with this sort of system, I understand. It's really pioneering stuff. And of course it captures the castle, it captures the digital forum, so it provides really super high speeds for new facilities there. But actually enables the Amphora, the digital fibre business, to connect customers much quicker and much more cheaply.
And we cannot forget when Amphora directors were questioned about 5G.
The Town Deal funded initiative, working with the museum service. So we have tendered and awarded the contract for the build of the 5G network at key heritage points around the city. And then we work with the museum service to develop the content, conscious of it becoming a sustainable and viable product.
It was fortunate that all of these people were in the room earlier to hear Karina Cooper have her say, and to hear that the Scrutiny Committee committed to looking into the very unsatisfactory situation surrounding the report that was undertaken by Intelligence Consulting in July 2025. We covered this in our video Scrutiny. Did Council commission a biased report? Karina questions. There has since been further developments, and Rachel has covered this in her recent video, Real Action, Real Results, Rachel's Good News Roundup. Here's a clip.
Going back to persistence, let's give you an update on the 5G situation with dear Mr. Weavers of Colchester Council. Just in case you've not seen the previous videos, Colchester Council, after a lot of pressure from Karina and others, and they created an independent and unbiased report, allegedly. Oh no, they didn't. I'm sure we've played this game before. And in this independent and unbiased report, they did a bit of a number on a very reputable scientific-based organisation called the Radiation Research Trust, who, needless to say, were not happy with this report, to put it mildly, and they wrote to Colchester Council several letters, in fact, which actually showed the report to be heavily biased and factually incorrect. But anyway, as a result, Colchester Council did get the report changed, but not nearly well enough. And they've been picked up on these changes by both Stephen Thomas and the Radiation Research Trust. Let me read you some of their responses. So here's what Stephen Thomas had to say about the Council's revised report. Dear Mr. Weavers, thank you for your reply. Having read the updated report, it seems that page 31 still contains considerable misinformation. I highlight the parts in yellow on page 31, which are of particular concern. Is 5G linked to COVID-19 or other diseases? The report says, there is no substantive evidence to suggest that COVID-19 is linked to 5G. It has been claimed that exposure to EMFs generated by 5G devices can both cause COVID-19 and increase severity. These claims are not supported by any evidence. Not even extremely weak evidence, according to the unbiased report. Stephen's response is, the Rubik and Brown peer-reviewed study provides evidence of a link between COVID-19 and exposure to radiofrequency radiation. It was published in the Journal of Clinical and Translational Research, JCTR, as an editorial-reviewed, peer-reviewed academic journal, and the article went through submission in March 21, revision in June 21, acceptance in June 21, and publication in September 21. I guess the authors of Colchester's independent report did not read the contents of this study because it also makes reference to the Bio-Initiative report, a report that is authored by 29 experts from 10 countries and updated in 2020, and which provides a scholarly, contemporary summary of the literature on the bio-effects and health consequences from WCR exposure, including a compendium of supporting research. The argument is not about whether EMFs carry viruses, but whether the changes in cellular and blood structures from exposure to EMFs can cause flu-like symptoms. The evidence in this report strongly suggests that it does. And then he links to the report. Please, can this misinformation be corrected, as page 31 of this independent report is factually incorrect? So it is wonderful to see people up and down the country holding their councils to account.
Surely those attending the We Are Colchester meetings are aware of the situation, in view of the fact that they are in control of the 5G project. The leader of the council, Councillor David King, the Chief Executive, Pamela Donnelly, and the Deputy Chief Executive, Lindsay Barker, definitely are. The next meeting is on the 13th of May, so hopefully it will be added to their agenda. We Are Colchester have actually made a note that all board members agreed and directed that the 5G project should be stopped and underspent money directed to the Greenstead Hub project. Clarification on this is obviously required. Now back to the town deal update at the Scrutiny Committee meeting.
We've appointed a contractor for the Greenstead multi-use hub. I think, strictly speaking, the contractor for the walking and cycling route on East Hill is being appointed rather than being appointed. But there's a contractor that's been identified and it's going through Essex's governance process at the moment. Jumbo has appointed its main contractor. The lottery have made an £8 million award, and we have a contractor on board. We've appointed a contractor for the Trinity Square, which is sat waiting for the repairs at the church to happen for quite some time. You won't be surprised to know that there have been challenges. Cost escalation is still very relevant. As anyone who's reading the news about High Speed 2 in the last couple of days, these schemes are bedeviled by growing costs. But it's something we're actively managing. So where there's been cost escalation, we've sought to either attract further external funds, value engineer, or change the scope of the project, or all three. And we've been imaginative in moving money between projects where one project can do with less, but another one's demands are higher.
Imaginative in moving money between projects. Which one project could actually do with less?
And we have challenging timescales. It's become slightly less pressured of late because the government has set a new deadline date for the combined funding of 2028. There's a couple of projects in the town deal which were always about early repairs and enabling larger funding bids. So Jumbo is a case in point. The same is true for Holy Trinity Church. So we've repaired the building. It's in about the best state it's been for probably in living memory, I would think, at the moment. And we've submitted the bid, but it's a £2.8 million bid for that building. So there'll be competition.
They then opened up the meeting for questions. First of all, just want to show something that the chairman had to say.
I cannot honestly put my hand on my heart and tell the world now that the segregated cycle lane on East Hill and St Botolph's will be an improvement in our lives. I can't do it. I'm not taking a particular strong line either way. I'm just not convinced. And what I'm definitely not convinced about is the concurrent projects happening and the impact that could have on Colchester and existing getting around the place. And on top of all of that, and the question I've got to you really is around the communications, because you have got to sell this. And unfortunately, when we are seeing the worst road surface conditions in living memory, which is paid for by public money, when another pot of public money is being used for a scheme that people don't necessarily believe in, how are you going to bridge that gap, if you like, as an authority working with our partners at Essex to sell the story? Because it may well be that it's the right thing to do. I just don't know it is. So what would you say to that, sir?
What's flowing through the city is fantastic. It's fantastic to have happen. It's a once-in-a-generation renewal and regeneration. But it comes with inconvenience and difficulty. Most of us would accept that there is a demonstrable connection between exercise and well-being. We have too many cars on the road, we have traffic congestion. Make it easier to have the alternatives. The investment that's happening by stage across the city, including the much-loved, is in my ward, Mile End, bus lanes, late, poorly managed, poorly communicated, are examples of how not to do it. But the end product is an example of what you want.
Who is the you who actually wants this?
And it's piecemeal. The city has not had a set of connections in any meaningful way for exercise, for cycling. That's the context for me of how I look at East Hill. It's what it enables. It's another very significant piece of connectivity which makes possible alternatives to taking a car. Highways did not intend to have these two schemes running so close to each other and in parallel with each other. My involvement and the team's involvement has been all about ensuring that when we run through this is as well managed as it's possible to be, and that we set a new bar for communication. The quality of the city centre depends on us following through on things we blithely and rightly agreed some years ago about master planning, and then following it through. It's going to have a risk of disruption.
A risk of disruption, a major disruption.
A reality of disruption. How well we communicate the challenge and the benefit that lies ahead of us, we're going to do our very best.
I'd like to look a little bit on two subjects. The first one is the digital forum. You mentioned that you were looking for tenants and occupations on there. Can you give us some figures on how that's going and how that's comparing to other sites? And we're not hopefully going to get a situation where people are filling this one up but emptying others of your premises that you operate.
No problem at all. So just to put this in context, so the digital form was finished. We got it just, I think, about the week before Christmas. We spent all of January building it, and we're in soft launch mode at the moment. We had a couple of delays in the delivery of the building, like you do in all of these things, and we are in the process now of kind of revitalising those leads. So there's only 9 offices in there. To put that in context, Colby run 2 other buildings in conjunction with the council. We've got 62 businesses in those, and we've only got 3 spare offices. So there's quite a demand. What's important for me with the digital forum, and it's the point we've always made, is that it's a unique building. And it's unique in the fact that it has this fantastic connectivity. So there's a 10 gigabit pipe that comes into it, which is provided by Colchester Fibre, with incredible connectivity within the building. That encourages a certain type of business. So if I was just to say, let's just open the doors and let anybody come into it, I think I could probably get rid of those 9 offices in 6 months' time. I don't want that. This is a once in a kind of period opportunity to bring the types of businesses in that the digital forum was designed for. And that is high-end media companies, it's top-level architects, it's telecine companies, it's people working within the AI space. So companies that will be using that connectivity to move around high volumes of data efficiently.
Moving around high volumes of data, that's another hot topic, isn't it? We're hearing lots about data breaches. Whose data are they going to be moving and who to? And this also links into all the data banks they want to build all over the place. Look at the fight that Havering have got on at the moment. Should residents be having to do this? But very well done to protect the Greenbelt North Ockenden Alliance. They've issued a pre-action letter signalling their intention to go for a judicial review. We need to give them all of our support.
And working together to kind of create something that Colchester has never had. So we are building up the leads. We don't have a set, our first tenant yet, but what is also important is the ground floor of that building is drop-in workspace. So again, Colby have been trialling this in our 2 centres, and they're going quite well. The Digital Forum is the first time that Colchester has had that kind of WeWork type space available to people. And actually from day one, we now have, we've got space for 24 kind of drop-in desks there. We've regularly got half a dozen people in there, and it's building all of the time. So the early signs are really, really good, given we kind of soft launched about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I do want to stress that so the other thing that's different is that in our existing Colby buildings, we have rolling tenancies of 30 days. This is different. We're talking 3 to 5 year leases here. So if we get it wrong, we've got those people in there for a long time. So I don't look at this as a short-term proposition. This is one where I will look back in 5 years and say, look what we've done. Isn't this brilliant?
The second item I'd like to move on to is the Greenstead, Art of Greenstead project, which has had some difficulty. But looking forward, phase 2, that's also got considerable financial challenges and funding requirements there. If phase 2 didn't happen, would we be left with anything viable? What would be the consequences of not having a phase 2?
So the phase 2 was always envisaged to be actually an estate regeneration programme. So taking some existing housing largely and some council-owned space among that housing and regenerating it. So as they've done in lots of other cities, the challenge with lots of that housing was not up to kind of the standards, particularly around energy efficiency, build quality. It was lots of what was originally envisaged to be quite temporary housing, but has become permanent housing. Some of it is owned, so people have chosen to buy their properties in those areas as well. So at the moment, what would happen if there was no phase 2? Well, not very much. Those properties would continue to be managed by Colchester Borough Homes, and the owned ones would be continued to be managed. They are properties that require quite a high level of investment over time, as I say, because the energy efficiency standards on them aren't great, so they will need to be brought up at some point, and that will be in the HRA business plan. We're focusing on delivering phase 1 within the town deal team, and largely phase 2 would be led by Colchester Borough Homes.
Where do we as a council have financial exposure to anything that's changed? And measurable outcomes. What measurable outcomes do we... And I understand that a lot of these are already in some of the business cases and things like that, but it would be nice to see, I think, sort of in something that we could scrutinise as to where are we tracking, how are we doing, what was the original ask, what we're going to deliver, and are we still looking to deliver the benefits that we originally saw from that in the first place?
The cycling and walking route, for example, I can give you an example on that one. It's the entire route runs from here to the university. It's been done in sections, and the priority has gone to the East Hill section because the funding did not allow us to do the whole route. So some of the sections have already been completed, but the Moor section is the one that still needs to be completed. So we have had to shift around depending upon what funding is available, and the County Council have also put some additional funding in to complete the East Hill section. So we have creatively on some of the projects worked around what we have so that we don't put pressure on the council's budget. You'll know about Greenstead because we've been here for scrutiny on Greenstead in its own right. And we knew that the cost envelope for that had risen, and so the County Council, the council have underwritten the gap on the funding. We're now, in that contract position, so that's fixed as far as the funding goes for the moment, subject to the usual process of construction. But we have had to put top-up funding into that project, because the original conception, which would have been nearly 7 years ago now, of costs, is nothing like, the actual costs that we have now. So there was some money to do, really to activate the 5G network in a kind of virtual reality sense, and we're not spending that money either. That's gone into Heart of Greenstead. So there's been some cutting of cloth within the programme as well. But broadly speaking, the majority of the projects stay in there. It's worth remembering, and it is a long time ago when we put together with colleagues the original programme, that it had parameters, and it was very much about city centre. We did extend those parameters to include the Heart of Greenstead, because the reason we were able to bid for town deal funding was because we had high levels of deprivation. So there were some very significant parameters around what we were allowed to use the funding for and where we were allowed to use it. We had to put maps in to show the area that we were going to invest in, and that had to be approved as part of the process. So I take the point, it's not necessarily going to benefit everybody, but that wasn't the intention of the programme originally. And on the walking and cycling route, I would also add into that, Essex Pedal Power's scheme in Greenstead has been one of the most successful of all the schemes it's delivered. 900 plus bikes being given away, which, that's not just for physical activity, as the leader has outlined, which is incredibly important in health outcomes, but it's also for accessing education and work. And if we don't put the cycle routes in that enable people to cycle safely and access some of those facilities, then it is quite a barrier to people in certain parts of our city. On the objectives, we tried very clearly to give you in the presentation, and we didn't go through them this evening, but that really clear sense of what we are delivering against each. Some of them we are collecting that data now, because the Digital Skills Hub has been in operation for well over 2 years, and the data is really impressive.
So whose impressive data are they collecting, and what are they doing with it? Who are they sharing it with?
In terms of the number of people that are gaining valuable digital skills to enable them to access employment. So, and that isn't geography specific, that is for the whole of the city area, and really significant benefits being realised there already.
Councillor King, you mentioned earlier around the connectivity with regards to cycle paths. I often get asked where's the overriding plan? How are these sort of decisions taken? Who took them? Who decided on it? When was it agreed? Is there a map that we can look at, etc., along those lines? Could you just sort of advise me as to where that is, as I'm sure one exists somewhere, and from a resident's perspective, how do they see that, so that they can just look at it and go, okay, I see the vision, I understand what they're trying to get at, and obviously I assume then from our perspective it becomes a bit more simple as to when money arises across the board, that we can then go, okay, this is the next phase in the plan, and I'm assuming that exists somewhere. So if you could just give me a quick point around that. You mentioned that giving away 900 bikes as a success. I'm not entirely sure that giving away bikes is a success in itself. I do think that if we could measure somehow if those bikes are being used, or we could measure the uptick, yeah, that's fine. If we can measure the uptick in people cycling across Colchester, if we can measure the fact that those bikes are being used, etc., right, then I think that's a better story for us to tell, rather than simply just saying 900 bikes, we've given them away, that's a success.
If you go to slide 6, it tells you 700,000 minutes of activity, and the distance travelled by bike recipients is equivalent to cycling around the world 3 times.
Well, that's amazing. A lot of bike riding there. What's also amazing is that so many of their statistics are in round numbers, just like the last election in Colchester.
Sorry, how did we measure that?
The wider analysis of mapping and what lies ahead in terms of cycle routes, what's been achieved and what we hope to achieve. It will be, the last point on this, very much dependent on the lump by lump way in which, unfortunately, funding comes forward. But we're committed to making this a more realisable prospect for those like us who want to get out on a bike, to make it safer to go and do so. And we'll share that with the committee. Thank you.
Just to add into that, there is a local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, snappily known as the LC WIP, which has routes that are numbered, and we are picking them off one by one in terms of funding. You're absolutely right. So have a look at that. It's held by the County Council, but we work very closely with them. And I think Colchester has had one of the biggest allocations of funding through active travel and town deals than anywhere.
And why do you think that is then? Who can't see the long-term plan? In 2008, Colchester was designated as a cycling town following cycling demonstration town work. They were then talking about modal shifts. Then, in 2012, the Colchester Cycling Delivery Strategy was adopted by Colchester City Council as an SPD.
Chairman, I find this a particularly difficult area to scrutinise, partly for the reason which Councillor Bourne has just made known. As a scrutiny panel, we need to have a view on what it is we're trying to do on this project. We looked at some of these issues of business cases in great detail when the project was being set up. We looked at it ad nauseam and assured ourselves that it was the best that could be done under the circumstances. But since then, so we drift in. Occasionally we have a report coming to us about what's going on, as we have an annual report here. But it doesn't really tell me. I don't think it tells Councillor Bourne, who's a master of project management, about what's going on and whether we're asking the right questions. And in my mind, Chairman, there are three areas where I believe we need scrutiny. At least one we should be doing now, or two of them we should be thinking about how we're going to do it and what we're going to respond to. The first area is the internal project management, where it is being done, absolutely no doubt, because whenever we ask a detailed question, we get the answers back. You know, it's all there in the system, but we only see what we ask, and we don't get anything which allows us to really take a mature view how these projects are moving forward. The issue of HS2 was brought up earlier on in Matt's presentation, and that is a project which does do a daily, if not an hourly, presentation on what is going on. And there you have a project which is massively over budget. The trains are too long, they travel too fast. The project seemed ideal, but it just doesn't suit the requirements of the day. No one really wants to spend that amount of money to get to Manchester 5 minutes earlier than they would have done earlier on. And I suspect that there is that sort of thinking going on in these projects. So, first issue for scrutiny is the internal project management, where we need to soup up the information that we're getting, how it's delivered to the scrutiny panel. The next issue, which we should be starting to look at now, because it's getting to the point where I think it fits into the timetable, is have these projects met their objectives? And are they meeting their objectives from a citywide perspective? Because it's all about town centre, which is just a very small part of the city. The areas I represent is Lexton area, where everyone's really interested in what's going on in the town centre, city centre. But the vast part of my ward goes out into the rural areas to Great Tay and so on. They don't see themselves as part of Colchester, let alone part of the city centre. So the citywide perspective of what's going on needs to be used as a ruler to see whether these projects are meeting their requirement. You know, there's nothing about rural bus services so that people can get into the city centre. So we need to think, have these projects met the expectation of the council and the people we represent across the board, not just in Greenstead, not just in the town centre, but across the board? Because if they haven't, it's going to be like HS2. You know, some people are happy with the idea, if you live in Manchester and want 5 minutes taking off your journey, but the majority of people are not interested in the project. They're not interested in the cycle lanes. They're not interested in the excuses given why we spend our money in such a strange way on highways. They are interested in where are the rural bus services rather than the cycle lanes. So there needs to be a significant exercise to see whether the basket of projects we've had is of any use to the city at all. And the third area we need to look at is the style itself, the style with these projects were delivered. The council has been sidelined. We were told that councillors don't have the skills, the necessary skills and ability to manage these sort of projects. And this was a government decision, so it's not our decision, but we can still comment on it in terms of our view of it. So the project was given to a group of the city's great and the good, who, when you look at where they come from, they don't exactly represent the whole of the city. They represent sort of the inner area, which many people I represent cannot get into, and even if they can, they don't want to. So we need to look at the style with which these projects are delivered and say, is there a better way? Would it have been better if it had been managed by councillors rather than the great and the good? Not our decision, but it's still a matter on which we should be discussing. So I think there are lots of issues from a scrutiny point of view where we need to think about the work programme on these combined projects and start scrutinising them to the benefit of the entire city rather than just the city centre.
In terms of the point about the external board, it was the last government, I think, who took a decision that was a requirement of the funding. So it wasn't from our perspective at any rate to comment on the ability or otherwise of councillors to run it. It was a means to get the money.
It's all about the money. Follow the money and you get to the truth. A few of the things that I found of interest in the documentation was that the 5G AR/VR tourism project was agreed with the government as a funding condition. In the meeting, they clearly stated that the 5G AR/VR project was stopped. Here they say it's been paused. Paused and stopped is completely different. Which is it? On here, they state 36,000 AR users. A nice big round number yet again. Where did that come from? In December, it was released in the press that Colchester City Council had received a robust bid from its commercial arm to repair and run the former Holy Trinity Church under a multi-billion-pound contract. No surprise, they won it, and for yet again. Mr. Chilvers was allowed a further minute to speak at the end of the meeting. This is a little bit of what he had to say.
Where was the impact assessment on commerce while the two major highways projects are in hand, plus the closure of Britannia? With regards to the cycle lanes, we mustn't forget it is up a hill. And that's going to be a hard sell, a very hard sell, because it strikes me that the demand is coming, instead of demand coming from below, it's coming from above. As an outsider, I can't help thinking that wondering whether the town board, who only meet quarterly on Teams, actually have enough time to look at the detail of some of these projects. And I think it's a shame that an organisation such as Age Concern wasn't nominated to be represented on the board, because I reckon that organisation will have a better idea of public needs and the city better than some of the sitting members. They'd be pretty good at detail and recognising issues.
So that's the end of the meeting, and that's what they're doing to Colchester. A few other bits I've come across. Something else Colchester City Council's involved in, Invest Colchester. Investment momentum, one of UK's fastest growing cities, Colchester is where ambition meets delivery, backed by a forward-thinking council and strong public-private partnerships. Now is the time to consider Colchester. And then there's this, construction and retrofit. Apparently, Colchester is at the heart of a construction and retrofit boom, driven by ambitious housing targets, transport and digital investments, major infrastructure projects, and the urgent need to meet the net zero goals. With billions in pipeline value and thousands of new jobs projected, this is a sector primed for scalable investment. It includes retrofit, a £15 billion opportunity. Who is not getting it yet? It's all about the money, and while talking about the money, I'll end on this. Revealed how many council workers are paid more than the PM. Almost 5,000 town hall fat cats now enjoy six-figure pay packets, with a record number pocketing over £150,000 a year as council tax rises again. UK councils accused of feathering their nests as hundreds of employees found to earn more than the Prime Minister. Overall, it is believed that 4,733 council employees across the UK are now on a six-figure salary, and that's the highest level since the Taxpayers Alliance began keeping records in 2007. Most people don't sit up and take notice until it's them in the pocket financially. So how about this? Will this make a difference? Labour wins vote to seize powers over private pension pots. Anyway, despite all of this, there's lots of good things happening behind the scenes. So until the next time, please leave your comments below and we'll be back soon.